Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Stanley. This is their part number FBB191NRP, 4.5, 4.5, US32D. This is a typical full mortise butt hinge. Ball bearing, NRP or non-removable pin. 4.5 tall, 4.5 wide, US32D. That means that it's not only made of stainless steel, it's solid stainless, but it is in a brushed finish. And that's what this hinge looks like, a very typical and common hinge. And you're going to use a hinge like this when you have an application generally where you want to insure against the rust, things of that nature. A stainless steel hinge like this would be appropriate for exterior applications. Most certainly those applications where you have a potential for the environment to begin to corrode that base material. Coastal environments, high humidity environments like a steam room, locker room, pool enclosure areas, any place that you're using fiberglass doors and frames, you're going to use non-ferrous based material as well as where you'd end up using it. Okay. Now let's dive in and dissect this part number a little bit. First of all, it's an FBB191. In all of that is going to be the fact that this is a full mortise hinge. You can see from this swag or the bend on the hinge leaves that that when the leaves are brought parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame, providing you that standard gap or margin between the door and the rabbet of the frame. It means that it's 5 knuckle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It means it's ball bearing, 2 bearing packets, because it also means that it is a standard weight hinge, where on a standard weight hinge you'll have 2 bearing packets rather than 4 bearing packets for a heavyweight hinge. A standard weight hinge, there are 3 thicknesses of leaves. There's residential, there's standard, and then there's heavyweight. About 96 thousandths, about 130 thousandths, 134 thousandths, about 185 thousandths, about. As the height of the hinge changes, the thickness of the leaf will change when it's within its group or family. So in a commercial grade hinge, that is the 134 thousandths, that's based on when it's 4.5 inch tall. When it's 4 inch tall, it gets a little thinner. And when it's 5 inch tall, it gets a little thicker. So the height will dictate. This is the commercial family of hinges. In a 4.5, it's supposed to be 134 thousandths, and my caliper is telling me that it is really spot on. Yeah, about 136 thousandths. Checking it in different areas on the hinge. 136 thousandths, so well within the range. So that is also inferred in the part number as well. The fact that it is a standard grade hinge, standard weight hinge, therefore about 134 because it's 4.5 tall. It also means that it is a non-ferrous base material, and that's what all of that means. I believe I've covered everything. As you change the part number, it changes itself. Okay. Now you've got NRP in the part number. Now that is a set screw that is drilled right here, drilled and tapped from the outside. This is what you'll see from the outside. Well, if you turn your head and look and you press it against the door and frame, or whichever, you'll end up kind of seeing this. You can't get a tool to that set screw in order to loosen that, because when the set screw is loosened, you seat the pin all the way down. You tighten the set screw. It makes it all but impossible to drive that pin out. I've tried. You'll destroy everything getting it out is the bottom line. So they use non-removable pin. Some people mistake it for non-rising pin. That's a different term. A non-rising pin is a pin that can be driven out, but over time the pin won't rise. If you notice, if you've ever seen hinges where that pin seems to just, for some reason, come out, well, as the door and frame is opening and closing, it's like it's being extruded out of the barrel from the weight of the door. It's pushing it up and out. A non-rising pin will generally have some sort of knurling on the barrel of the pin, so that when it's seated down, it won't creep or rise up Residential hinges do that all the time. They don't feature non-rising pins. But this isn't a non-rising pin. It's a non-removable pin via that set screw. There's a groove cut in the hinge pin, basically, where when you tighten the set screw, it'll sit inside of that groove and then preventing it from being driven out. There are other types of security options when it comes to hinges, so that you can't remove the pin or basically separate the leaves. When it comes to removing the pin, only NRP offers that. The other option would be a stud, basically. So what they do is they attach a disc that's here, maybe, don't quote me, but a 1/4 inch thick and maybe 3/8 diameter. They drill a hole in the other leaf so that when the door is closed, if you have the combination of the security stud, it wouldn't be more than a 1/4 inch, that's for sure, because it can't project off the back. It'll reside within the hinge leaf, though. Let's say that you have that combination of stud and non-removable pin. You've got a way to prevent people from pulling the pin or separating the leaves. Or if you drove the pin out, you still can't separate the leaves because that disc is preventing you from doing that. You'd have to drive the pin out. You'd have to separate the door and frame enough to be able to slide that out. So I very routinely see the combination of both security features on those doors that cannot tolerate people coming in that fashion, in that direction. Airport terminals, out to the jetway, you'll always see hinges of that nature. At least I do, it seems. So now we've got 4.5, 4.5 in the part number. It's important to know that the height is the first dimension. It's a 4.5 inch tall hinge first, and then it's a 4.5 inch wide hinge second. It's important to know when you are talking about the size of a hinge that the height comes first. In a door, the width comes first. So it's the opposite. In a kick plate, the height comes first. In a louver, the width comes first. So unfortunately, we have to understand how it's defined. In an access panel, if you have a 36 by 48 inch access panel, you have no idea what hand the door is. Well, it's really not handed, but what's important is the hinge is on the second dimension. So now you can say to yourself, oh, okay, 36 by 48, I know the hinge is on the 48 inch length. You can take that access panel and install it this way, or this way, or this way, however you want, but you need that point of reference. So the point of reference for doors, hinges, kick plates, louvers, access panels needs to be understood. When it comes to this type of hinge, the height is the first dimension. If you were to order a 4.5, 4.5, you don't really need to know what's the first dimension, but if you order a 5 by 4.5 or a 4 by 7, yeah, you need to know what the height is of the hinge. Okay. And then, of course, 32D, that means it would be better to call it 630 because that's the BHMA system. That defines the base material versus the US system doesn't define the base material. But for Stanley, this would be a stainless base material with a brushed finish. In fact, the US32D or the 630 is considered the most durable of all finishes. It's called a natural finish. All they do is take the raw stainless, they machine it, and then they brush it, and you're finished. And then they put their petite little logo on it as well. Let's switch to the screen view, and let's take a closer look at the supporting documentation. First, though, I'll show you the screws that are included. This screw package includes all machine screws and all wood screws. There will be 8 of each. Don't count on that being the way that it will always be supplied. I happen to qualify on this order for this client that it was supposed to include all machine and all wood screws because I don't know the composition of the door and frame. Actually, that's not true. I do know the composition of the door and frame because I supplied the door and frame. It's a steel door and steel frame. I still requested all wood screws and all machine screws because that would be standard practice for Stanley to include those. I wanted the client to have those spare stainless steel wood screws for future use. And because there is no reduction to the cost for not supplying wood screws, it would have been completely accurate and in fact likely more accurate to just qualify TMS, template machine screws, because it's a hollow metal door, hollow metal frame. But if you have an application where you have, a knockdown hollow metal frame and a wood door, and the client has ordered stainless steel hinges, they don't need it for a non-ferrous application necessarily, but they want the actual genuine look of stainless steel brushed. rather than a satin nickel over chrome or a satin nickel over steel or a satin chrome over steel. They want solid stainless, is how that is. So let's switch now to the screen view and let's take a closer look at all of the supporting documentation. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Here is the item that we are looking at. We have some images that are down below. Let's take a closer look. These are the actual hinge, showing the swag on the hinge leaf that renders this a full mortise hinge. You change that swag and you are changing the hinge. If there was no swag, those leaves would be flat and flush to the top of that surface. Some people call it a flat back. You could call it, you know, a slip-in hinge kind of does that as well. You might call it a full surface hinge. That's the back side. Close-up of the NRP, of the logo, and also the brushed structure of the stainless material. And then the screw package. Now back to our item and the extended description that's here. For medium weight doors of average frequency, sure, because it's a standard weight hinge, 134 thousandths. If you had a door that was wider than 3 foot, you might consider a 5 by 4.5 or a 5 by 4, depending on your application. Your trim, your wall, your frame, your inset, your clearance requirements, you might be better off with a 4-inch wide, or you might discover that you need something wider. The cutoff really is doors wider than 3 foot. You start to think about 5-inch tall hinges, or maybe 5-inch tall hinges and heavyweight is what you might think of. Stainless steel base, 5-knuckle stainless steel pin, 2 Stanley permanently lubricated non-detachable ball bearings, non-removable pin type, and again, satin stainless steel. There's a technical drawing that's here. This is a template, basically is what it is, for the FBB191, which is here, in the non-ferrous column. FBB191, everything right across this line applies. The only thing that changes in this column here is the F length, or the leaf length to the swag. And on a 4.5 inch wide, it's 1 in 25/32. Okay. Now the term template is used in 2 ways. This document is called a template. It gives you dimensional properties of the hinge. The term template, however, is also used to describe the exact and precise locations, dimensional properties, of this exact and precise hinge. What that means is, whether it be a door, a frame, or a hinge, if you declare or specify that it is to be to the template pattern, it will always match, because your door will have 0.508, 1.125, etc. It will always match. You don't need to worry about, are they putting the holes with the tapped holes in the right location? They are, because it's the template pattern. This document happens to be called a template, but the term template also means these precise locations. If you change any of these dimensions, you no longer have a template hinge or a templated hinge. Okay. Now, there is a link below this video here to the manufacturer's page. Actually, let's back up. I forgot the cut sheet. Here's our cut sheet for our hinge that we're working on. FBB191. Sorry, here. So you can do this hinge in steel. The 7 here, the 79 I should say, that's a steel-based hinge. You can do it in brass or bronze, polished stainless, or satin stainless. Talks about the concepts that we've already discussed. You can order it as a raised barrel hinge or a power transfer hinge, or with hospital tips, decorative tips, security studs, as I had said earlier, non-removable pin hinges. Here is the table that shows you all of the different sizes that you can order in this hinge, or at least on these 4 part numbers, or actually there's 2 part numbers. They don't, they wouldn't need to list this 3 times. They could say brass, bronze, stainless steel, and then when you declare the finish, you are then therefore inherently declaring the base material, or inferring it. To directly specify, I think you'd use the BHMA code for finish 630. So from 3.5 to 3 inch all the way out to 6 by 6, little asterisk there, to be mindful of. These are all standard weight hinges, and to serve the point earlier, the leaf thickness changes as the height changes, and here's evidence of that. Additional information is obviously in this table. Okay. Now, there is a link below this video here, back to where I was, to the manufacturer's page. When you click on that, you'll be able to review not only all of the Stanley products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link, website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. The one that I like is from 2010 because I'm familiar with it, but this catalog does a really great classic Stanley job of giving you substantial encyclopedic information in the beginning of the catalog, general hinge information. If you're new to hinges, whether you dabble in them in the sense of you are a handyman, or you're someone doing a remodeling project, or you're an industry professional who is a couple of years on the job and you distribute doors, frames, locks, and hinges, or you're an architect, or a GC, or a sub, it would be certainly time well spent to review the standard by which we determine what a hinge is, how they're used, the different types. Every time I look at this, there's new information that I end up understanding, and it continues on even after 3 decades of selling hinges. This is a formula here for determining how wide of a hinge you need, not how tall. I had mentioned earlier the wall condition, the frame condition, the inset condition, the clearance condition. Wide throw formula here will help you determine that. Different fasteners that are available. You do need to declare fasteners. You want to do that, absolutely. That's the BHMA code that's here, or at least the conversion from the Stanley number that they use. So we're down here at 32D. That would be a 630 stainless steel for BHMA, the Builders Hardware Manufacturers Association. And then backwards from the BHMA code to the US code. Different types of hinges are shown here. This is really where it applies. Full mortise, half mortise, half surface, full surface, swing clear, a swing clear with a different type of bend on the hinge leaves to account for the type of frame that you're applying it to. Half surface swing clear, full surface swing clear, a reinforcing pivot or an anchor hinge, they call those. Your security options are here. I also mentioned that security stud. Well, that's what it looks like right here. So real handy. Shear resistant stud, that's when those studs go back into the jam plate. Pardon me, the hinge plate in the door and jam. Raised barrel is here. Wide throw hinges are mentioned again here. Hinge swagging, that's talking about that. Not swagged, or flat back as it was called. Both leaves swagged, one leaf swagged, depending on the application. How you bend that hinge leaf will definitely change the concept of what you're working on. I've recently been dealing with a client who sells wood doors and wood frames. And this particular client of his always has him manufacture this application for him. Cross section, single rabbet frame, door, the door swings out. This client called and said, I need, he was calling it well, he was giving me a part number for a slip-in hinge. A slip-in hinge is a hinge that is used in aluminum storefront. Let's just search the Stanley catalog for slip-in. It's used in aluminum storefront where there is a slot that's cut in the door or the frame or both. And I don't see any drawing for that. Have to go to a different manufacturer. Okay, so a slip-in hinge is going to look like this. This is an application where it is being slipped into either the door or the frame, but not both. So in this application, there's probably a slot cut in the face of the frame. This leaf literally slides into it, and then these holes are drilled and countersunk. Pardon me, stop. These holes are just drilled and tapped because the frame sits here. Okay, now this client was using a slip-in hinge where both leaves had no swag on them, and he was surface mounting that leaf because of this inset problem that he has. A standard hinge, as you know, would kind of need to reside like this, right? This is really awful. Let's get that door a little bit closer. The problem is your hinge barrel would need to sit here. Whoa. You've got your leaf. And then what he was doing, so your hinge barrel would have to sit like this. So he's got this conflict right here. So what the client was ordering, apparently for years and years and years, was a zero swag slip-in hinge okay, and then I finally realized what he was doing when I said, "Are you quadruple deep mortising your door?" And he said, "Yes." So they were prepping the door extremely deep for the prep, is what they were doing. And I said to him, "Have you ever heard of a raised barrel hinge?" "No, what is that?" Well, that's when we discussed, you don't need to do any of that. All you need to do is to use a raised barrel hinge, and our Stanley catalog is going to show us raised barrel, certainly. And there it is. Perfectly. So that solves the client's problem. This is exactly what the client had. Okay. Now you can get a variant of this. The raised barrel hinge is meant to be mortised to the frame. They also make a variant of this that is surface mounted to the jamb. So if you needed to surface mount a raised barrel hinge, you could. It changes the swag or the bend on these leaves. If you had a channel iron frame, that's a jamb surface mount, a JSM hinge. Hager makes those. So after the client and I discussed raised barrel and then the variant of, the jamb surface mount, where it would meant to be mortised, surface mounted, because maybe he still wanted to surface mount it. After we talked, and quite frankly, he became aware of, and here it is actually, surface mounting it. And you can see that when you surface mount this raised barrel, well, this is a raised barrel hinge, but you've got to really increase that mortise depth. And in fact, that's what clients do when they have to surface mount a hinge leaf. They just increase the depth of the mortise in the door. Well, there's no reason for that. There's no reason to hog away a tremendous amount of your door to accommodate a deep inset application where your hinge barrel would otherwise be here. You would use a raised barrel or a jamb surface mount if you needed that. But this client, using his zero swag slip-in style hinge for the application, while it works, it really requires a lot of the door to be removed. So anyway, that is a trip down a lane we didn't intend to go. Electrified options are discussed here. Other hinge types are discussed here. Olive knuckle hinges these are cool. I have mortised doors, wood doors, metal doors for every hardware possible. Wood doors, that's most certainly true for wood doors. I've never prepped a hollow metal door and frame in the field for an overhead stop. I've never done that sort of work. Actually, no, that's not true. We have. The most difficult thing to mortise was the olive knuckle in terms of interpreting the template and being sure I had my fixture set correctly. So anyway, you can continue through all of this. Hospital tips would be important to look at if you're dealing with a requirement for ligature resistance. etc. Let's wrap up this video on camera. Now, in conclusion, it's a nice quality hinge from Stanley. I'm accustomed to seeing good fit and finish from them. This hinge, I believe, is made overseas, in China, in fact, which is the only thing that I don't like. Well, there are two things that I don't like about Stanley. One that I'll say, actually, is that it's an imported product. I would prefer if it was made in the United States. That is an option if that is required on your job. It's just not necessarily going to be by Stanley. But I am always very pleased with not only their fit and finish. The hinge looks nice when you get it. But as time goes on, Stanley's manufacturing capabilities continue to be valuable to me because they will make the hinge. Okay, I have had them make hinges that other people cannot make, and that's really great. That's really a reason. Those two reasons together are a reason to use Stanley. Plus, a third reason would be the name is ubiquitous and has been since the mid-19th century. Any questions on the Stanley FBB191NRP 4.5, 4.5, US32D, or any other Stanley product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please subscribe and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.